I'm Pete Bamforth. I'm one of the coaches. That's Pete Logan, chief coach. And this is the pilot exam revision. We're doing air law for the first session. And so I'm just going to dive in and please flag up if you can't hear or if there's anything you're not getting. Right, sources for this information include the standardized rules for the air navigation order. Basically, they're the rather dry forms of the information, just for completeness. The actual real sources that have been used have been the, there we go. The main documents that have been used have been the Skyway Code, which you can obtain from the Civil Aviation Authority's website. So if you just search for that, then you should be able to find it quite easily. And that is a really good source of information. It's very well laid out and it's quite readable. So if you're buffing up for your air law, I suggest you download a copy of that. And that's available as a PDF. I've also accessed the easy access rules to the standardized European rules of the air. So they refer to changes that come in 2015. And so when you're searching for information on pilot exam revision, you're probably going to find lots of documents online from lots of clubs. Some of that information is out of date, and you're going to need to be aware of what is current and what isn't. To be fair, I have actually copied a lot of the slides from other presentations to actually make this. So, there are a lot of slides, a lot of information, but I can fairly confidently say that this is fairly correct and current. So just be aware that there is a lot of information out there that might not be quite as current. Right, there are 3 document channels coming from Civil Aviation Authority. We've got aeronautical information publications. So I think the Skyways Code is probably an example of one of those documents. We've got NOTAMs. So if you want to fly midweek, then you will probably want to put out a NOTAM, a notice to airmen, so that jet pilots flying down Wensleydale are going to be aware that you're going to be there. You're also going to want to read NOTAMs, and we'll come to that in a moment, so that you know what's going on in the area. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Another thing that you're going to be accessing is an example of an aeronautical information circular would be updates to your air maps, your air charts. So we'll have some examples of those air charts later. But those are the 3 main channels of information from the Civil Aviation Authority. We have, right, so NOTAMs. The formal source of information for NOTAMs is this first, now I need to wave the cursor over it, is this URL here, for which we have a nice login available here that the BHPA provides. Now that information is not exactly nicely formatted. And so what lots of people do use is a nice graphical, oh dear, I've lost the cursor again, a graphical form of which shows everything on a map. And you can search by area, and you can find out, and by time slot, and find out, I keep losing the cursor. And that's much easier to use. It's not official though, and it's not guaranteed to be up to date. So, you know, whose head do you think it's going to be on if you use this second information source and it's wrong?
Stevens.
Yeah, Stevens. Yeah, that's right. Blame Stevens.
You're teaching.
Oh, I have just right. I didn't want to do that. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to try and do this. No. So we're having technical issues here. So we're doing this on Pete Logan's laptop.
It's
Oh,
my fault.
it's my fault if anything goes wrong. Right.
Just whilst we're on the NOTAMs being published nationally, the NATS Air Information Service website is going through some big changes at the moment. So do memorise or do be aware of the information as it's presented on the slide. But in reality, what your apps that give you your cross-country tracking will change in the background. Because to be honest, nobody uses NATS EAD in real life. Everybody uses NOTAM info, but more likely you just use the app on your phone or your device for going cross-country.
So which part of that's an exam then?
So there may be reference to NATS in the exam, yeah, and the aeronautical information circular.
Okay, if you want to submit a NOTAM, so if you're flying midweek and you want to avoid those fast jets or have them avoid you, then you want to submit on this. Then you want to use this URL, and this will actually lead to this URL here, and you might recognise the surname in use there. So I think Pete Logan, you've had a hand in this, yeah.
I'll write the code.
Pete Logan wrote it. This gives you a nice, easy format, so you can submit your area, your club, and it will give you a list of sites. So it makes it very easy for you. The first URL will actually point to this URL now.
Try the space bar.
Air charts, right. So at some point you're going to need to, now most of us using devices which will auto update their air maps, but you may want to, you should refer at some point to an air chart, and we'll have some examples of them later. The air charts are published every 1 to 2 years, and then in the intervening periods, then you're relying on changes that are actually published on this website. And those changes are published in advance so that you can mark up your maps and you'll know when upcoming changes are going to come into effect. There are 2 scales of map. There's 1 to 500,000 and 1 to 250,000, also known as half mil and quarter mil charts. So, but you need to occasionally plug in and make sure that your electronic maps are up to date too. So that will come into play when you start to look into things like cross country. Right, low flying rules. We'll get straight into the rules. So I've got 3 here. In actual fact, the congested areas and the open air assemblies rules have been partly converged in the CIRA rules. So, but really, in practice, the changes don't affect us very much. I'll go. Okay, the 500-foot rule basically says, let me see, there we go. 500-foot rule. That's the slightly less readable form. The key components of that. So you shouldn't go below 500 foot, except when taking off, landing, or because we're gliders, we're permitted to flow below 500 feet when we are hill soaring. So diagrammatically, I think the old rule made more mention of person, vessel, vehicle, or structure. Basically, you need to stay 500 foot above the highest obstacle within 500 feet of you. So normally, because we're gliders, we don't really come into conflict with that. Possible exception. Say you're on a cross country and you get low. Has everyone heard of a low save? Yeah. So a low save is when you get low, but you manage to find a thermal low down. So if you're under 500 foot, then you're not strictly hill soaring, taking off or landing, but that is a possible place where you could be technically in breach of the law.
In that situation, and somebody were to ring up the Civil Aviation Authority and coach back through the DHPA and then find out who it was, would you be insured?
I don't think so.
Right.
But in practice, though, would people be more likely to object if you were actually landing near them, or if you were successly managed to get away again? I think because we have a very low impact.
No, I just thought it was just a legal technicality. That's all.
I'm maybe being a little bit pedantic by pointing that out, but that's
but that's the rule. That's the law. Law is pedantic, isn't it?
Really, yes. Congested areas and open air assemblies. Now that is a slightly less readable form. So here's the diagram. An aircraft should not fly over a congested area or an open air assembly below a height which would enable it to land clear of that area or below 1,000 feet above the highest fixed object within 600 meters horizontal radius, whichever is higher. So basically, the diagram, I think, shows it better. Whichever is higher, you need to be 1,000 foot above the nearest, the highest obstacle in 600 meters, or you need to be able to land clear, whichever is the height you need to be at to land, whichever is higher. Yeah. Now, CIRA doesn't actually specify what is a congested area, which I think the old regulations did. So generally, they would be regarded as residential, industrial, commercial, or recreational. But it doesn't strictly define that. Now, the congested area rule is essentially converged with the open air assemblies rule. So an aircraft shall not take off or land within 1,000 meters of an organized open air assembly of more than 1,000 people, except by permission from the Civil Aviation Authority and with permission from the organizers of the assembly. Right, we'll have some examples of that later. Okay, sorry, we'll have some examples now. You're on a cross country from Bradwell, and your drift is taking you over Sheffield. As you push on, you run out of flare balls and you end up landing in a quiet back street. Have you broken the law? One yes? Any no's?
No, I'd say you haven't.
No.
Back street, we're assuming the back street is 600 meters from the highest point in Sheffield, which is, I don't know, but it's a back street 600 meters away.
Is it residential?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it, have you landed clear?
It's a street, but let's say it's a little park next to the street.
In the park.
Recreational, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, you're stuffed.
Yeah, you're stuffed, yeah.
So it does make it interesting because of something like a golf course, you would absolutely consider as being fair game. That's a very safe place to land.
Yeah, or playing field or something.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But someone's playing.
Okay, and so everyone on the line, does anyone else want to voice an opinion? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, Mark said yes.
Yep. Okay, right. Okay, so you're on, let's try the second scenario. You're on another long cross country and you're feeling pretty tired. While overflying the Leeds Festival, you see the stage and you think, God, that must be about 200 foot high. And you check your altimeter, or you just have to check it. It's 1,500 foot above sea level. You decide to land just 1,100 meters the other side. You're thinking it's going to be dead easy to hitch a ride because there'll be loads of cars going past the Leeds Festival. And later you check on an OS map and you see that the ground is 400 foot above sea level. Did you break the law?
My math says no. You should be 1,000 foot above. So it'd be 11 foot, 11
So you're actually
feet.
going to be 600. Yeah, yeah, you've broken the law by 100 feet.
No, because you're landing 1100 meters on the other side, which is enough.
Yeah, but you haven't been 1,000 feet above the stage.
You were, because you're 1500 minus 400. So
Yeah.
you're 1100 feet above
okay.
the stage. So you
Oh,
need to be-
okay.
You'd be 1000 foot above the stage.
No, you need to be 1,000 foot above the highest object. You need to be 1,200 feet.
Oh, high house the
So-
stage.
The
200
feet.
feet.
200 feet. So you're out by 100.
You're at 100 feet. I missed the 200. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So have we broken the
Yeah.
it's a height rule? Yeah.
Yeah.
Congested area rule, essentially. They are kind of converged, but right. So do we have anything contributions from online?
Mike was just talking about the Sheffield example, the thing on the
Okay.
online. Do we have any?
Ionella, Mark?
Yeses and nos for the Leeds Festival?
Okay, there's no volume coming through at all at the moment. So okay, you just have to type your responses because we can't hear you at the moment.
Yeah, so Mike says yes, he agrees by 100 foot.
Okay. Right, I'll move on. Right, collision avoidance rules. First and foremost, you need to prevent collision. So so there's no use at the end of the day saying, but I had right of way. At the end of the day, you need to avoid collision. But so an aircraft must not fly. So yes, you have to take every possible measure to avoid collision. Shouldn't fly in formation unless everyone's agreed. What do we call formation? I mean, we do tend to. I mean, if you go across country, you're going to end up being called a gaggle, really, don't we? Are you really in formation?
No. You're not doing a V wedge, are you, or anything like that?
Or you might be.
You're probably going to be flying circles around each other.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
thermally, I
about-
was going to say that's formation, isn't it?
You know, 30, 40 meters apart. So kind of, yeah. But generally you're going to be everyone knows what you're doing, yeah, if you're on XC. So right. An aircraft which is obliged to give way must avoid passing over, under, a head of another aircraft. So we've got one example there, which is a convergence rule, which where that kind of makes most sense. We'll come to that in a moment. An aircraft with right of way should maintain heading and speed. And that kind of, for me, comes back to take all possible measures to avoid collision. So,
And the right of way is that's down to the slowest as the greatest right of way.
no,
No?
no.
Oh.
Okay, we'll come to that.
Types of aircraft.
Right.
We'll come to
That's not
that.
necessarily direction.
That's boats, isn't it? Boats.
Okay. An aircraft in flight are operating shall give way to aircraft that are landing or in the final stages of approach to land. What happens if you've got two aircraft landing at the same time?
Yeah.
Then the higher aircraft would give way to the lower
Yes,
aircraft.
the lower aircraft has got right of way.
So
Right.
it accelerates to the ground.
Okay, so that on landing approach, the higher aircraft gives way to the lower aircraft, and then but generally aircraft should give way to aircraft that are on final approach. They have the highest priority. Okay, so it's a typical example. Your two aircraft are approaching head on. What does everyone do? Everyone turns right. If you've got a ridge on your left, if you've got a ridge on your right, can you turn? No. So if you're flying down a ridge, then the person with the ridge on their right would maintain course. Right, that's head-on approaches. Now, convergence, there is another hierarchy, another priority here. So it's basically based around how much authority each of these aircraft has to control their direction and their altitude. So balloons have least authority, so they have the highest priority. So paragliders should give way to balloons, airships should give way to paragliders and balloons, and powered aircraft should give way, heavier than aircraft should give way to everything else. And that applies to converging, remember. Right, if you've got two aircraft of the same class and they're approaching and they're converging, not head-on, converging, then the one on the right has the right of way.
On the right, in the right.
So we go back to this rule back here, shall avoid passing over, ahead, or under or ahead, over, under, or ahead of the other aircraft. So basically, generally, that kind of implies you go behind them. Yeah, that's how. Right. So there's a rule of thumb that you can generally apply to all of these rules. On the right is in the right, but that's just a general guide. And this is another former example of it. So there used to be a rule before Zero. And if you were following a ground feature, like a river or a road, then you would normally fly on the right of that feature. And that is no longer a mandatory rule in Zero. But it's good, it's good practice. Yeah, but you can't guarantee that anyone coming the other way will necessarily be conforming to that. Okay, overtaking. Right, so the overtaking rule. So most aircraft, when they're overtaking, they should overtake to the right. But for us as gliders, we can actually overtake to the left or the right, but we have to maintain good clearance. Who has priority when overtaking?
The overtaken.
The aircraft being overtaken has priority. Okay, right, scenarios. You're flying down Wensleydale on a cross country and you see a Tucano approaching head on. Where's right of way?
What's the Tucano?
It's a Brazilian tropical bird.
It's a light trainer. It's a light military trainer with a prop engine.
Right.
Oh, if it's that one, it will chop you into very many small pieces.
Oh, well, you have right of way as a flyer.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they have a better. They can fly immediately up, can't they? You can't fly immediately
Well,
up.
they're powered, so they should give way to you.
Yeah.
Talking about converging rule. Talking about head on here.
Oh, okay. Oh, well then, I mean, I still agree that they should give way, but you should both go right.
Yeah, both go right, but that's probably.
Both go right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Online, are we agreeing with that? Both go right? Both go left? Any suggestions?
Don't go left.
So Mark says you, but I wouldn't risk it. Darren says yep.
Right. Okay.
Mark says yep, right, as soon as possible.
Yeah, both turn right. I did read an article that had an interview with a military pilot. Basically, the main problem with a fast jet or even a light trainer, I guess, flying along a valley is visibility, being able to see you. And so, I mean, this is just informational, but you know, one of the so his idea was that you'd be better off going into a spiral dive because the wing would be more visible at times. Plus, it'd be kind of as you go around your spiral, your wing would be kind of blinking in and out to the fast jet pilot. And of course, they love pulling positive G, so they can just pull back on the stick, and having the power, they can easily do that. So it's a case of, yes.
If they fly above you with a load of jet fluid, backwash from their jets going again, you're going to be on the ground.
So generally, anything that fast is quite clean through the air.
Okay.
In terms of wash, helicopters, commercial aircraft, light aircraft, the trainer, they're not heavy enough to have that kind of turbulence around them.
So that's informational, but technically, you should both turn right. But it's a case of being seen as well.
What angle, when you in that scenario, what angle, you say it's going in a circle, but what angle are you most visible? If you turn 90 degrees to them, are you more visible at 90 degrees?
I think head on.
Are you more visible head on?
I think head on you'd have very low visibility, but so you'd have better visibility if they saw the side of your wing.
Yes.
But they obviously, if they could, I mean, the spiral dive is an idea, but it's a case of you have to be judging the actual direction very well to make that decision. But technically, so I mean, we're discussing air law here. Really, the thing you should do is turn right, according to law. We're kind of preparing for the exam, but that's kind of the kind of dilemma that you could theoretically face.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So later you see the Tucano approaching from 90 degrees to the right. You've done the head-on pass and you survived that. And now the same plane has come back, and it's coming from a 90 degrees to the right. Who's got right of way?
They have. You did the right.
They're on the right.
You're on their right.
Converging on the right and the right.
Yeah, they're on the right, so they've got the right way.
Except
If they've got plans.
What I'm saying that they do.
So for the converging rule, priority wins.
Okay, all right. So head on isn't converging?
Exactly. Oh, right. So yeah, okay. Is this okay? Right. So yeah, converging is when you're flying a near parallel path, but coming together.
Yeah.
And so the first example is, so it's head on. Yeah. Distinct from converging is the head on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then converging. So this is the converging example. Yeah.
Yeah, effectively, the difference between converging and collision avoidance, or head-on, it's happening. Whereas convergence, it will happen if both continue on the same course.
Okay. So you apply the precedence, aircraft type precedence to the converging rule only. Yeah. Right. Let's go back to the scenarios. So later your mate catches up with you on a paraglider, and she's approaching from 90 degrees from your right. Yeah. What about now? Who's got priority?
She has.
You same class, yeah?
Yeah, she's got priority.
Same class, so she's got priority. Right. While you're ridge soaring, you find yourself below ridge height with hill on your left. A glider at ridge height is approaching head on. What do you do?
Swear and move out.
You turn right. You turn right unless you feel as though you're on the right.
Okay. We're below ridge height though. Okay.
Yeah, but even so, you're on you're going towards one another.
That's sort of clashing of two priorities there, isn't it? Because you're close to land, so you should have priority. But
And you're landing?
No.
yeah, you're probably not landing.
Slow
You're
landing.
below ridge height. But they might think you're landing.
the safest thing is actually going back to the first golden rule. Safest thing is actually to move out.
Yes, technically you should turn out. So I've seen some of the guidance has been that I've read has been that the lower aircraft has priority. That only applies to the landing approach. Yeah, doesn't apply to the other rules.
Okay, right.
So if it's the other way around, if the slope is on, the other way, it's reversed the situation, and the slope is on your right, and you're below ridge height, and the other's coming towards you at ridge height with the slope on their left. So
Yeah.
it's reversed. Would you not have right of way there?
Yes, you would, because you've got the hill on your
You would
right.
have right of way, but then
Yeah.
the higher glider's got to be very circumspect, because if you're moving out, there could be a tendency of that higher glider losing height, and then you'd be in a nasty situation. So
they should.
So if anything, what they should do is if you think about it, either try and gain height, there's going to be height there, or turn around.
What about etiquette? I mean, okay, so we'll kind of discuss what the rule is. So, I mean, a really good way to sort this one out is to go along to non-Sarah's when you've got kind of 15 hours plus and start flying up and down there, because that will really crystallize it for you. So, you know, it's a site where you've got very varying abilities, very varying levels of knowledge of air law, and where you'll almost certainly find yourself scratching above rocks, and in this very dilemma. So, you know, if you've got loads of height, what would etiquette say? You know, if you've got right of way, but you've got loads of height. Yeah, I mean, well, I'll come on to another nuance of this in a moment. But, you know, if you've got loads of height, you know, is it any problem to kind of like just, you know, give them enough space, you know? But having said that, right, let's come on to this last one.
I mean, think about etiquette like this. If your glider that is one glider height above the other one, and you're in light or failing ridge lift, you've still got 100, 200, maybe 300 meters more travel than the other glider has, than the glider below you. And that 200 to 300 meters is a lot of options.
Okay, right, so to just put another nuance on this as well. So the final scenario, while bridge soaring with the hill on your left, you see a glider coming the other way. And based on your current course, and I'm thinking about non-Sarah's when I read this, when I wrote this. Basically, so based on your current courses, you're going to pass with about 20 meters separation. What do you do?
You turn away. Yeah, I mean, 20 meters, you know, we've all flown closer than that to each other, but still, it's still too dicey.
Anyone else?
Stay course.
I'm sorry?
The hill's on my left. Yeah, okay. You're going to pass for 20 minutes separation. It doesn't tell you which side the other glider's on, but I just.
He's coming straight down.
No, it's not. No, you basically can't course. You'll pass within 20 meters. It says that you both think you're going to pass within 20 meters. Stay course.
Or you could turn.
I've been on loads of bridges where you just stay course.
Right, yeah. No, but if you hit with head on, the glider coming towards you would have.
Well, you've judged that it's not head on, so then it'll stay.
Yeah,
course.
20 meters.
Right.
Though,
Like saying do a 180.
Do a 180? Right, I know there was another one as well. Is anyone else? Just anywhere. Because I really want feedback on this one.
Well, I think what I would do in that situation, I'd pull out to make the distance, turn right to make the distance larger. Maybe say it's 30 meters.
Move that slightly away.
Make a slightly bigger, so it was about 30 meters rather than 20.
Yeah.
So turn right.
But it doesn't say which way the glider is coming the other way.
They've got the ridge on their right.
They've got the ridge on the right. So they've got if you were going head on, they would have right of way and you would turn right.
Yeah.
Here, it's just slightly askew, so you kept your course,
You'd
you'd
move
pass,
out,
move
but
it a
out.
bit, but it'd be close.
Okay, so,
So-
you still carry on the course of degree. So it's move out but carry on.
Okay, this scenario is deliberately ambiguous. It's to make you think about it. So the first point to make is that these are anti-collision rules. So if you're not actually at risk of collision, then you don't need to change course.
But it does say don't fly so close to another aircraft as to create a risk of collision.
And there are days when you probably wouldn't want to fly as close as 20 meters. You know, so what this doesn't, the scenario doesn't say how close the ridge is, what height you are above or in relation to it. It doesn't say if it's turbulent. That could be another factor. If you're getting thrown around a lot, you might want a bigger separation. It doesn't mention all of these things, and they're all factors. But so there may be some scenarios under which 20 meters wouldn't be enough. Yeah, you might want to give it a bit more. But that's two wing widths, isn't it? That's two wingspans. So, you know, on a lot of days that would be just fine. Yeah. At the end of the day, these are anti-collision rules. Okay.
What's the answer then?
The answer is it can depend on the scenario. It can be, yeah, it's deliberately ambiguous.
Right,
It's just to make people think about it.
There's no answer. It's just it depends.
So the style of exam is generally a tick box, select this, that, or the other, or put the words in the right place. So you're not asked to judge these kind of ambiguous situations and give an ambiguous answer. If there is some ambiguity in the question, at least the answer is definite, that you tick one or the other.
So we won't get a question like that.
No.
But you need to be aware of the fact that during a flying day, 20 meters separation might not be enough.
Yes, this is a real world question as
Yeah.
opposed to an exam question.
Yeah. No, it's very good. Thanks.
Okay, altimeter settings. Right, so that's, we'll start with one approximation that air pressure falls about 1 millibar per 30 foot. Another approximation you might hear is 30 millibars per 1,000 foot. And obviously, if you do the maths, then they don't quite add up. But they're approximations at the end of the day. And we might actually look, that will matter to us later. So everyone's familiar with synoptic charts. You've probably seen them on the Met Office websites. So you're probably familiar with pressure. Obviously, if it's below 1,000, that's quite low. If it's 1,030, then it's probably quite high pressure. We use a nominal standard pressure, which is 1,013.2 at sea level. Right, another concept you're going to need is flight levels. So with flight levels, if the pressure at sea level is the standard pressure, then the thousands of foot that you get above that, you take that height in thousands of feet and you drop 2 zeros, and that gives you your flight level. So if standard pressure, if the sea level pressure is equal to the standard pressure, then at 24,500 foot, you're going to be at flight level 245. Yeah.
Dress up warm.
Yeah, and maybe carry some oxygen. Right, now it's useful to know that flight levels go up in high pressure and down in low pressure. And we'll come to some examples with that later. Right.
So just repeat that.
Flight levels go up in high pressure and down in low pressure.
That's a really useful rule of thumb.
Yeah. Right. A lot of this is stuff that you will never use in practice. But obviously it does appear on exam questions. Right, so there are these three values, and sometimes these, the acronyms that we nominally use are actually just kind of not necessarily correct. But just starting with the first one, QNH is given as a pressure reading that the pilot would set on, query nautical height, it's the height, it's a pressure reading which would allow the pilot flying in that area to see height above sea level. That's pressure reading that you set on your altimeter. QFE is a pressure reading that you would set on your expensive altimeter, and that would give you the pressure, the current pressure at ground level on the airfield. So therefore you could show the height above, your height above the airfield. QNE is a height reading for when the aircraft is on the ground, when the pressure at the aerodrome, with the pressure setting of 1013.2. So that height is roughly analogous to your flight levels. So you just want to be familiar with those, and the acronyms kind of maybe help you remember them, because they can come up in the exam. And we might come back to some of them later. This is another example showing the flight levels, how the flight levels change with pressure. So I need to use the cursor here. I don't know if you can see the cursor.
Yeah, if you move it slower, because the cursor appears quite small.
Okay, so what have we got here? We've got a high pressure. The high pressure is here. QNH of 1023. So that's 10 millibars above standard pressure. And that 10 millibars multiplied by our 30 gives us our 300 foot. So that's where that approximation comes in. And here we've got an example that goes the other way, where our QNH is 1003, and we lose 1000 foot on our flight level. Okay, right. Oops. And basically, you just need to learn those acronyms and roughly what they mean for the exam. And then you'll never use them again. But the flight levels will come into play, though. You will need to know about your flight levels.
INL was quite amused by that.
Okay, so after a long cross country, you're congratulating yourself on scraping under a block of Class D airspace, and then realize that it was a flight level 45 instead of 4,500 a foot above mean sea level. You look at a synoptic chart which tells you the pressure was 1020 millibars. So do you want to submit your flight to the XC League?
So 7 times 30, so that's the difference. So yeah.
Yeah,
7 times 30 is
210 feet.
210, right? So
you just scraping under it, which means you're just under 4.5. This is I take it it's a standard day, so we're too high.
Just scraping it. It's high pressure.
It's high,
so therefore you are up. No, you don't want to. You've been in it because you've been higher, haven't you?
Yeah, you've been higher.
So you've been higher by.
You've been 4,710.
You would have been into it then. Yeah. So
yeah.
no, you don't want to submit it to the activity. Yeah.
Okay, so you thought that you just scoped under 4,500
Yeah.
foot, and then you find out that it was a flight level, and then a high pressure, the flight level would go up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
okay.
you were working in feet above mean sea level. So you
Yeah.
just scraped under 4,500. Flight level's gone up.
4710.
Well, we don't know.
Well, if it was a standard
Yeah.
day,
Okay. Yeah.
so we were above it, we were in the airspace.
That's not what I read.
Right. So wait a minute. So actually, yeah. Okay. So it's actually a minimum, right? Okay. It goes the other way, isn't it? So the airspace stops at 4,500, right? 4,500. We've actually had more lift, so we're actually further above it.
Because the airspace isn't above us, is it? It's
Below
below
us.
us.
You,
Yeah, yeah, what am I thinking?
you've been working in feet above mean sea level. You stayed at the 4,500 feet. The flight level on the day was actually higher than 4,500 feet, wasn't it?
Yeah. So you've been higher.
Yeah, but you were working in above mean sea, in sea level.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're actually safe.
And what's that?
Oh,
agree, Pete?
because the air space is fixed at 4,500 feet, but the flight level
No,
depends
because
on
the flight, actually the airspace moves up and down with the flight level.
Okay.
So the airspace moved up.
Yeah, so the airspace is above you because is it with one of these ones because they're coming in there. No,
It doesn't matter what its shape is. You only need to know what the underside of it looks like. And the underside is higher than 4,500 feet above sea level.
Oh, okay.
So the important thing to grasp here is that large chunks of airspace can actually move up and down.
Yes, depending on whether it's a low or high pressure.
Yeah.
Day.
Yeah.
So that's a high pressure. That's a high pressure day.
So,
So
yeah.
slightly high pressure. That's 120 millibars. So it's actually the flight level is actually slightly higher than. It's gone up a little bit.
Airspace moved up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Airspace
gave you a bit more space.
That's what we said.
The airspace has moved up a bit.
Yeah, the airspace moved up, but you're still at 4,500 feet AMSL.
Yeah.
So you're
So
all right.
actually on the day, that airspace would have been at about 4,700 foot because 7 millibars, the difference between 1020 and 1013. 7 times 30 foot is 210, knock off a bit for the 0.2.
Yeah.
I have to say, what I don't know, the guys who check your airspace on the day, who check you upload your XE file, you'll have more experience of this. Are they looking at the flight levels, or are they just kind of approximating it to the nearest to what it would be at standard pressure?
That's a good point. So in actual fact, a lot of the flights that we do are under not flight levels, but actual above mean sea levels, actual altitudes. So flight levels, I would say, are probably less of something you'll encounter. There's certainly flight levels. You've got flight level 5.5 if you're going cross country from Lloyd's Seat, or if you're on a nil wind day from Bradwell Edge. So in Derbyshire, there's certainly flight levels that you will encounter on a cross country flight. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a good one.
We'll
Yeah.
we'll do some more examples later. We'll look at some air maps. Okay. Right. Next scenario. With 5 years experience under your belt, you're cruising your NC glider up and down the ridge, quite a narrow lift band, and you find yourself stuck behind a really slow glider, probably me. Do you call to him to speed up? Tell him to get out of the way. Overtake left or overtake right?
we don't know which side the ridge is on, overtaking, do we? We're assuming the ridge is on the left, then you'd be tempted to overtake right, to be away from the ridge, but they've got priority and they might be turning right at any point. So temptations, if you have space,
on the hillside.
it's to overtake on the left.
The law is to overtake on the hillside.
That used to be the rule, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the case now.
Right. And still do it.
It would seem to be safe on the
Still
left.
do
if
it
you can.
because they can only move out.
Yeah, so they'd have to move out.
Well, to be honest, I thought the rule now was to turn back.
Think where the danger occurs then.
Well, there's danger in doing a left because you're close to the ridge. And there's danger in doing a right because they might suddenly turn out on the bridge without looking. So yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Steve. You turn right the other way.
You can actually overtake either left or right, but you have to give good clearance, and they have right of way. Yeah. But yeah, I think you've got a lot of those elements.
Yeah. I think you were mentioning on something that I read recently about abroad. They basically they turn back because of the fear of either boxing them in or boxing yourself in.
Yeah.
You know, as you come to a situation where you're actually boxed in, you can't. You've got the hill on your right, say, and you can't then get back off because you haven't overtaken the glider. You've boxed yourself in, or the other way around, you've boxed them in. So it's saying that the thing, you know, that the English were actually are at loggerheads with some of those abroad because they were turning round basically.
And Darren says overtake either side with plenty of room, so good clearance. Scenario doesn't mention which side the ridge is on.
Yeah.
But it does say a narrow lift band.
Yeah, that's true. Otherwise, it's deliberately ambiguous. It's to make you think about it. But yes, I would say overtake legally by law. You can overtake left or right, but giving good clearance. But yes, you still need to kind of think about how you're going to keep that safe. Yeah. So you do have some decision making within that. Yeah. But law says left or right. Right. Cruising levels. Okay. There's a lot here that doesn't really apply to us. Okay. Now, this is really for powered aircraft which can maintain a particular altitude. And this is just a way of keeping people who are flying in different directions in open airspace from having head-on collisions by separating them out, by stratifying them according to height. So there used to be this. So if you do some research online and you might come across something called the quadrantal rule, which is now defunct. And it's been replaced by the semicircular rule. And that basically says that, and it depends on whether you're flying under instrument flight rules, right? I haven't covered this quite yet. So is everyone familiar with instrument flight rules and visual flight rules? Instrument meteorological conditions and
I started
visual meteorological conditions.
So in G airspace, if it's flight level 45 and over, you need 8 kilometers. So I'm on the right track here.
That's
you need an 8 kilometer visual flight.
Flight level 100.
Flight level 100, right? Yes. So if you're above flight level 100, for visual flight routes, you need 8 kilometers visual flight clearance, as it were, and 1,500 meters.
What am I? We're swapping around on doing the IFR and VFR first. or is that a long way down?
Might be a long way down.
Yeah.
And 1,000 feet vertical clearance of cloud.
Okay, I've jumped ahead. We'll kind of ad lib from here. This is old. It's a little bit out of date. I've got another more current diagram. You will also find an equivalent diagram in the Skyway code.
And the pilot handbook.
The Skyway code. So I did this in January last year, and there was version 3 of the Skyway code, and we're now on version 2 of the Skyway code. Then we're now on version 3. So, and I do know that there is a change for Class D airspace, which came into effect in May this year. So that's, but I don't think that one actually applies to us, but it's worth. So those are your information sources, as Pete mentioned.
Guaranteed questions on this, usually
Yeah.
more than 2 in the exam. Guaranteed questions.
So now
know these classifications and what it means for IFR and VFR.
I've got a more digestible form, but I won't come on to that yet. First, I think we maybe need to explain terms. And I think it might be easiest if we point to some diagrams. So any of these diagrams will do, really. So from our perspective, we used to be able to switch between visual flight rules and instrument flight rules at will, as it were. And basically it was a case of, so if you were thermaling up and you were clear of cloud, and then suddenly you got to within 1,000 foot of the cloud, as here, then you would essentially just automatically switch to IFR. So you'd be in instrument meteorological conditions because you'd be close to cloud, and you would fly on instrument flight rules. We can no longer fly under instrument flight rules. And there are two reasons. First of all, we don't actually have a qualification that we can take that allows us, that gives us an instrument rating. That's the first thing. And the second thing is we are not in touch with air traffic control. And that's something that is mentioned in some of the documents I've mentioned. So essentially, that means that the top half of this diagram, well, we've got this IFR, yeah, is all out. And we're down here. So Class A airspace, VFR is not even permitted, so that's out. But I'll move along to, but really it's about if you have the visibility, then if you have low visibility, then you're going to be flying on instruments and you're going to be flying by instrument flight rules. That's simply what it's about. And there are various criteria for that you're allowed to have for flying under those rules. Right, I'm going to jump back now. Right. So basically, I should reorder these. So this splits things into instrument flight rules and visual flight rules. And this says, for your average powered aircraft that can control its altitude, that if you've got any east in your track, yeah, or you're going due north, then you should fly odd numbered flight level, odd numbers, thousands of feet. When you've got any west in your track, where you're flying due south, then you fly even numbers of thousands of feet. And that would give separation to aircraft that are flying theoretically in different directions. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay.
And I think the quadrantal rule is a little better actually for this. But because you can actually be just a couple of degrees out and essentially be flying in opposite directions. And then the VFR rules just takes that and adds 500 foot. So, and these would apply to us. So if you've got east in your track, 1,500 foot, 3,500 foot, that's where you'd be flying at. Now, how much of this really applies to us? None of it. Because, so all of this, IFR, we can't do IFR anymore. VFR flights, well, we can't actually maintain a particular altitude, can we? Unless we're flying on parabola, maybe, yeah? Where we are completely at the whims of the thermals we find. So that's out. And to be honest, down here, it basically says in the UK, there is no requirement for VFR flights to fly at a particular altitude. But obviously in other European states, it could apply, especially for VFR above 3,000 foot. So you might want to know it for the exam. You might want to study this for the exam, yeah, because it can come up. And it might even come up as the quadrantal rule instead. So you just need to be aware of that.
Even though it's called the semicircular system.
Well, the BHPA has basically, I did talk to them about this, and they said, we're not going to penalise anyone for getting it wrong because they were using the new system when we had an old question. Yeah, so you're not going to get penalised on that basis. Right, moving on. Right. So we've got flight levels and we've got flights above sea level. Now, you will have an opportunity to study air charts later, but you've got, so up to about 4,500 feet, and I know we've got a different value here, then you usually see airspace marked on a map in feet above mean sea level. And then above that, you'll start to see things coming in at like flight level 55. I know we've got 3,000, but I'd say certainly on the northern map, the northern half mil map, there's certainly lots of examples where you've got up to 4,000 feet and then flight levels at 55. So your transition level is the lowest flight level. Sorry, it's just transition altitude is your height in feet above mean sea level, where you start to change from using. So, okay, most of us, if you've got, I've got quite an old device, a parametric altimeter, DigiFly, and it's basically got two settings. Oh, it's actually got three, but basically when you zero it, it sets all of the altimeters to standard pressure. And then typically you'd adjust the first altimeter to your takeoff altitude on the hill on the day you're going to do a potential cross country. And then you'd leave your second altimeter with flight levels. So you can switch between the two, and that's how you kind of do navigation. So you've got your transition altitude is the altitude at which you start, which aircraft change from using the first of those to the second. Yeah, from using the height above sea level to using a flight level. And then let's switch to a diagram. So you've got transition level is lowest flight level above the transition altitude. And then you've got the transition layer between the two. So diagrammatically, that's what we've got. Okay. So you just need to be really familiar with those terms. And so you've got transition altitude, transition level. So if you imagine our 4,000 foot is going to be, is probably our transition altitude. And then your transition level will probably be what, 5,000 foot. Yeah, and then so above that you'd be switching to use your second alternative, which would be based on standard pressure and would use flight levels. This doesn't really affect us much in practice, but the world is split up into flight information regions. There are two governing the UK, and there are, in addition to the flight information regions, there are upper information regions above those from 19,500 feet, sorry, from flight level 195 to flight level 600. Radios. Okay, right. So again, this is air law. So international emergency frequency 1.121.500.
You will get a question on that.
The UK national paragliding, hang gliding and paragliding frequency is 118.68 megahertz. Right, magnetic variation. So when you get any kind of map, not just an air map, it has a magnetic variation which will be marked on the map, which will tell you how much it varies from magnetic north, how much true north varies from magnetic north. Yeah, it varies according to location, and that's marked on every map. Then there's magnetic deviation, which is caused by an aircraft's frame. So the airframe of the aircraft, of a typical, especially metal aircraft, is going to affect the compass, and that will vary according to heading. Yeah. So you need to know about magnetic variation and deviation. Right. It's worth noting, by the way, if we go back to this, these are based on magnetic track. Yeah. The semicircular or quadrantal rule. Yeah. Right. Magnetic track. So it's not taking into consideration the variation or the deviation.
Does anybody know what the magnetic variation is at the moment in the UK, roughly?
I'll take a guess at 7. That's a guess. I don't know why I might remember that.
I'd say something like that.
It varies over time as well, doesn't it?
Which one?
It varies over time.
Speaking as an ex-geologist, to the west, yeah. Speaking as an ex-geologist, we may be on for a magnetic reversal of the poles at the moment. Nobody knows exactly.
Sometime in the next 10,000 years.
I know, it's a blink of an eye, geologically speaking.
Yes, yeah.
No, magnetic reversals should be quite quick because you can see them as stripes in rock.
Yes.
In the
Well, they are quick, but they only happen
every few tens of thousands of years.
That's right, yes.
Okay.
When that happens, then publishers are going to make a lot of money over that.
Absolutely, yeah. New maps all around.
In fact, it's going to be sponsored by something.
I've got a compass that I used when I went to New Zealand, so it might just be that will work. You just need to swap compasses.
Yeah. It's all right. Yellowstone will have erupted before then. We'll all be living in the dark.
Okay, let's get back on.
Anyway, right. Other rules. Nothing should be dropped from an aircraft other than persons by parachute, articles for the purpose of saving life. So if your GPS catches fire, then you might be allowed to throw it over the side. Otherwise, it's ballast, fine sand, or water not in the bag. Or tow ropes at an aerodrome. So a person under 16 years of age may not act as a pilot. You're going to just need to essentially just learn all of this stuff. You may not fly well under the influence of drugs or alcohol. I mean, a lot of this makes sense anyway. Persons must not endanger the safety of an aircraft or cause an aircraft to endanger any persons or property, i.e. Keep your laser pointer pointed at the ground.
Yeah, or don't fly into high buildings in New York.
Yeah, that's a good one.
They broke air law, didn't they? Those years ago.
Right. So no night flying. Now in the serial rules, there are actually things about VFR at night and special VFR at night. Pretty sure they don't apply to us. Can't see exactly where it says it, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't apply. And logically, if you think about it, if you're 3,000 foot above weatherfowl and it goes dark, then, you know, there's not exactly a lot of lighting around there. There's certainly no landing strip. So you're going to be in trouble. Yeah. So
these rules are specific for hang gliders and paragliders rather than all airmen.
No, I think they will apply to other things. But like I say, what I'm saying is that things like VFR at night certainly won't apply to us.
Certainly balloons, though.
Yeah.
Not to, well, I'm sure I've been in a plane at night. Surely the aeroplanes.
Oh, of course, but you
Yeah.
need an instrument.
Oh,
Flying,
right, yeah.
flying qualification.
Yeah, this is flying under IFR. Yes.
Yeah, IFR. So no
So
VFR flying.
yeah, so visual meteorological conditions include not only how near a cloud you are and what altitude you're at, what lighting level it is.
Okay.
I think this definition is used for driving as well. So you need your lights on half an hour after sunset and half an hour before dawn.
Right.
It's known as civil twilight.
Yeah, so it's, you know, so that one should be
Twilight.
fairly easy to remember, that one.
It's half an hour.
Shall I ask about solar eclipses? No,
Might come into it. Yeah, what about finding in the trips?
Okay,
No,
right.
we haven't covered that.
Display flight. Pilots must have CA authorization to fly. Each display and display item must be vetted by the Civil Aviation Authority. And there's something as well about, okay. You also need permission from the organisers. I think that refers, is that the congested area rule that comes under? I'm just going to confuse things. So let's just leave that as that for now. Right, valuable consideration. Basically, we can't take money for what we do, generally speaking. There are some exceptions. Competition costs, direct display costs. I'm not sure about this one, costs on behalf of the pilot's employer. This one certainly won't apply, I don't think, to anyone here. So if you get, some people do actually have a tandem rating. I think, so Marek, for instance, has a tandem, he's got the tandem rating. He's got to do 10 flights a year on the tandem to maintain that rating. He still can't take money to fly people in the air. You have to have an instructor rating. So Dean has that. You know, he's got his tandem rating, so he can do that. Yeah. But generally speaking, you can't.
His mate Rob, he does the tandem flights.
Sorry?
And his mate Rob, he
Yeah.
does the tandem flights.
Yeah, so you know they're rated for that. They're qualified instructors, and you need that to be able to take any money for flying. So that's valuable consideration. Winch launching. Right. So a glider should not be launched by a winch or cable to height more than 60 meters above ground level, and not at all within an ATZ. Yeah, we'll come on to ATZs later. What's static kiting?
I suppose it's being held in the air on a rope.
If you tie a rope to a tree and you tie the other end to your harness, yeah, and then wait for the wind to blow you aloft, that's static kiting, and that's illegal. Right.
It's illegal because it's really bloody
Really
dangerous.
Well, it's inherently unstable. To be honest, any kind of towing is inherently unstable, but at least there are mitigating factors when you do it from a proper winch. So if you go down to Airways Airsports down in Derbyshire, they've got a static winch that's different to static kiting. And so they've got a payout winch. Yeah, so that's basically a trailer on the back of a car, and it's got its own motor. So they've got a long rope, and that motor is pulling that rope in, and you're on the other end of it. You have a weak link. They have the ability, if they need to guillotine that line. So they can sever that. They can let off the power. They can pay out the line so that you can recover in the event that you're departing. I'm kind of going into technicalities of winch launching, but it's something you might want to consider. So if you go to Airways Airsports, and they can take you up higher than 60 meters, for sure. But some places it's higher than 2,000 foot above ground level. You're going to need to be aware of winch launching operations because you might be flying near to them. So Longmynd, Bradwell, if you fly these places, there are winch launching operations in the vicinity, and you're going to need to be aware of them. Not in respect of you launching from them, but of gliders launching from them.
Why don't they give that as 60 meters altitude and 2,000 feet?
Yeah.
What's that about? Just to catch you out. Don't work it out. 180 feet. Why don't they put it in feet? That's all, isn't it?
Yeah. So
it's always mixed into a lot of mixed.
But I thought the rule was altitude is feet, distance is meters, and then you know the difference when somebody's shouting numbers at you.
So there's probably a transition altitude. So everything when you erect something and measure something from the ground is in meters, but everything for airspace and at that kind of height where you would sensibly be flying is in feet. Because we've got to agree with the Americans on this and every other country that's now set up and bought instruments and signage and documentation for feet.
You're right though. Air maps are in feet internationally. So I was in Poland and I saw an air map, and what's that in? Stoop, feet. Right. So I was quite surprised myself. But. Right. Okay. This is not the easiest way to remember, I think. So what I've tried to do is kind of do it by exception. So I'm going to need to use the cursor here. Airspace classifications. So we've got the type of airspace here. Oh, damn it. There we go. Type of airspace. And then we've got, this is just trying to make things clear. I don't know if it works. I'd be interested to see what feedback you get. So as we've seen, Class A airspace, if we look at the left here, VFR is not allowed, it's IFR only. So that's our note there. Do you need to be in contact with air traffic control? So, keep losing the mouse cursor. There we go. Air traffic control contact is required there. Oh, it keeps on disappearing. The cursor keeps disappearing. Never mind. Anyway,
Thank you.
And does it, because when you go to the edge, it always goes away,
There's
just so you,
something going lighting up. Oh, no.
there it is.
There we go. So air traffic control contact is required for classes A to D. If you can fly in class E airspace, but only in VFR, if you don't have ATC contact. And then for classes F and G, it's not airspace ATC contact is not required. So do we have ATC contact generally?
No.
No. So can we fly in A to D?
No.
No. Okay. So I think you mentioned before, Stephen, about the flight level. So flight level 100, you require 100 kilometers visibility. Now, of course, this can come up on the exam. So above flight level 100, you would need 8 kilometers visibility.
Yes.
And then, of course, we're never going to get to flight level 100. Generally speaking, that's
10,000 feet.
10,000 feet.
So it's 5K.
I mean, it's feasible, it's possible, but I don't think many of us really do, unless we're like Eva Wisniewska, getting to 30,000 feet.
You need really good gloves.
And oxygen.
Well, but I guess the, so
I believe
when
the
you're,
trick is to actually pass out. And then
what's your,
naturally
Hypothermia as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
what would you, what would, over a
that's
year's
what happened to
period,
it, wasn't it? That's
2 peaks, over a year's period, what would you expect your highest altitude to be?
In a good
Would it,
year,
would it be anywhere near 10,000 feet?
I think I typically, in a good year, I'd expect to get above 6,000 maybe.
Right, okay,
But not
that's a long
much.
way below 10,000.
Oh, yeah.
And same for you, 6.
I think cloud bases have been quite low this year. So
Yeah.
this year I haven't seriously been above 6,000.
Yeah, so
Maybe
really
once or
10,000 would be almost a once in a lifetime sort of scenario.
So if you
yeah.
If you flew into QNIM, it's possible. If you got in the right wave, in the right place, at the right time, then you could maybe do it.
It's something like that.
Wouldn't be easy. Wouldn't be easy.
So generally we need 5 kilometers, because we're always to be up.
Yeah.
100.
We'll generally need 5 kilometers visibility.
Yeah.
Right. And we need to be clear of cloud. So in VFR above 3,000 feet, we need 1,500 meters horizontal clearance from cloud and 1,000 foot vertically from cloud. Yeah. Right.
What
So
is the difference between flight visibility and you need 8 kilometers flight visibility, don't you?
So
And
if this,
you need 1,500 meters.
so the difference between being clear of cloud by a particular distance and how far you can see. So something like haze would govern how far you could see. So typically in a high pressure, you'd have lots of haze. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I've rarely seen it so strong that you couldn't. Really, it doesn't affect us very much in practice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the fact is, on a cross country, very, very strong high pressures, you could lose sight of your of other pilots after 3 kilometers.
Yes.
And that's the kind of day we talk. I suppose other factors could include rain. Then would you really be up
Yeah.
in that?
There's actually also, whichever way you want to do it, I'm sure we'll be making the slides
Oh, yeah.
available.
There's another way of looking at this.
Yeah, if you just note down page 58
This is a Skyway code.
of the Skyway code, and that's got a really good diagram, I think.
Whatever works for you, really.
Yes.
I've tried to do it
But
this
like
by.
I say, guaranteed question.
That's the clearest I've seen it.
I've tried to do it by exception.
No, thank you.
So,
always struggled with the other one.
okay, well, I hope it works. Any errata, let me know. Any problems with that, let me know. So this is one that's come into effect, I think, May this year in Class D airspace, which we can't access anyway. Below 140 knots, you're allowed 5 kilometers visibility. Otherwise, right, so generally most of our flying is going to be in F&G airspace, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we're going to be relying on this. So below 3,000 foot, we're allowed visibility down to 1,500 meters because we're below 140 knots. Yeah, otherwise it would be 5 kilometers.
So
Just
can I
like
ask a
that.
silly question? What do you mean by that's below 140 knots? I don't understand that.
That's the speed.
Yeah, speed.
So we're slow
Yeah.
flying, so we will always
Yeah.
be below
Oh, yeah,
140
that's
knots.
speed, yeah.
So typically it applies to helicopters or,
Right.
or light aircraft. So there's going to be, I'm going to run some questions with that later, but look at that. So there's that cutoff. So clear of cloud. So you don't actually have, sorry, I need to see. So for Class F and G below 3,000, you do not need a specific clearance from cloud. You just need to be clear of the cloud, not by a specific distance. Then the moment you get above 3,000 feet, suddenly you're into this area. And suddenly you need that clearance. All right, we'll come back to that. Right, so as pointed out earlier, we can no longer switch between visual flight rules and instrument flight rules at will. And we have to stick with VFR. So what this means is the moment we get above 3,000 foot, then we can't fly to cloud base. Yeah, that's worth noting. Yeah, right. That's the law. Okay, I'm going to move on from that.
So nobody's allowed to fly above 3,000 feet.
No,
Oh, yeah.
no.
You've
But
got
you're
to
not allowed to
wait,
get to cloud base. You're not allowed to get below.
So
was it
if
1,500 feet.
if cloud base is so if the clouds are nice and so typically you're going to be flying up under a cloud. You're going to be, your thermal is going to be feeding that cloud, and you're going to be trying to get close to it. So if your cloud's at 5,000 foot, yeah, you can fly to 4,000 foot under it. Yeah, and then you've got to leave the thermal. That's the law.
Is that what's happening?
Moving on. Types of airspace, right. Right, we've got, should maybe jump ahead. So we've got ATZs, air traffic zones. So that's what this is. Sorry, doing it again. So this is, this thing in the middle here, the dashed line indicates the ATZ. And round, so if it's a small airfield or airport, then there might be an ATZ, there won't be anything else. If it's a major airport, then it's going to have a control zone around it, a CTR. Above that, above the CTR, lost the mouse again. Oops. Oh, it's being stubborn, there we go.
It's at the top.
Oh, it's disappearing. Why is it doing that?
No, bring it further down, there might be some sort of area.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the control areas sit above the control zones. Now look at that. That is kind of stepped. And it's worth noting. We'll try and look at a diagram later that shows that stepping on an air map. So the control areas are sit above the control zones. So I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but an ATZ typically goes to 2,000 foot above the aerodrome level. And so the ATZ and the control zone both go to 2,000 foot. And then above that, we get the control areas. TMA is a kind of control area. And then you get the airways above that. That's controlled airspace. And then above those, the air routes, which are not controlled. So they'd be probably between countries, yeah. So let's try and find some of that on a map a little bit.
So just to clear it up between control, between zones and areas.
Mm-hmm.
A zone is from ground level up, is that right? So that way, and an area is just
A
an
control
area.
zone.
It can start from 1,000, 2,000
So
feet up.
the control area will sit directly above the control zone. The control zone is ground level, it's 2,000 foot above ground level.
Yes, it's an air traffic control zone, yes.
Yeah, and then
the area is
above that immediately.
yes, it's floating.
And remember that can be stepped, so that can
Yes.
contain multiple components.
Yeah.
So I'll try and find a good
So when you're coming across a zone, you know that it's from ground level.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and I'm jumping backwards and forwards. So this shows an ATZ. You can see that it's either 2 nautical miles in radius or 2.5 nautical miles, and that depends on the length of the runway. Is it, what's the, now?
1,850 meters, I think, is the cutoff.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's right,
If it's
yes.
bigger than 1,850 meters, the runway, then it's 2.5 nautical miles.
Right,
If
is
it's less,
everyone?
it's 2 nautical
Quite right,
miles.
yeah.
Yep, sounds good. Okay.
Very good, very good.
Very good, yeah.
University challenge.
You've started for 10 then, Mr. Craven.
So an ATZ, if you see that on a map, we're not allowed to go into that. Yeah, you need to be in touch with the air traffic control within that to be able to access it. Right, I'm going to jump forward right to a military aerodrome traffic zone, MATS. Right, so that's not 2,000 foot high, it's 3,000 foot high, and it's 5 nautical miles. Plus it will have what we will call the panhandle coming off the side, yeah. And so you can see in this top diagram, they've actually got 2 panhandles. And in the lower one, we've got 1 panhandle, which starts at 1,000 foot above aerodrome level and finishes up lining up with the top of the MATS. And within that, we have the ATZ. Can we transit through a MATS?
I think you can, but not through an ATZ.
That's correct. We can transit through the MATS, but not the ATZ. Right.
You'd have to be in touch. Would you have to be in touch with air traffic control to do the transit?
Not the maps.
Not the MATS.
Not the
You
MATS.
can stumble blindly through it, quite happily.
Brilliant.
You may not want to
No.
if it's a weekday and there are fast jets coming down
Yeah.
through the panhandle.
Yeah, do you want to fly through the panhandle in high traffic? Maybe not. Okay, right.
However, in broken Britain, we can't afford any fast jets these days.
No.
So we don't see that many of them.
What's the situation with the 1,000 foot between ground level and the panhandle bottom? Are you is that completely safe and free to fly through?
Well, theoretically, yeah, yes, it's completely safe. More often than not, you'll be hoping to get over the MATS. Yeah, that's going to be the most convenient thing you can do. But yeah, theoretically, flying under it will be completely clear of traffic, theoretically. Right. You're on a cross country, in the lakes, in Class G airspace. Cloud base is at 3,500 foot above sea level. Cloud coverage is about 80% of the sky. At 1,900 foot, you are climbing fast. At what point do you technically break the law?
At 3,000.
And
Above 3,000.
3,000, because you get above 3,000 and suddenly you're within 500 foot of the cloud.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark was right, 3,000
Yes,
foot.
very good trick question. Yes, very good.
Right, on your best ever XC from Weatherford, you end up heading between Leaming and Topcliffe ATZs over the top of the joined maps, but find yourself dipping to 2,800 foot above ground level or above aerodrome level. Have you broken the law?
No, what's it finishes at, what's it, an ATZ finishes at,
3,000.
I thought an ATZ,
And a mats is 3,000.
yeah, but an ATZ, you can go through a mats, but it's the ATZ,
Is it 2,000?
and it's ATZ to 2,000.
So
therefore you haven't broken the law.
at 2.8, you're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're okay. Okay, you're above the ATZ, you're within the maps, but that's okay. In Class G airspace, you are gliding at a ridge at 2,000 foot above sea level. Cloud base is 2,500 foot above sea level. Visibility is about a mile. Are you breaking the law?
No. It's below 3,000 feet.
Below
yeah,
3,000.
You still need 5K, don't you?
No, no, you don't.
No, no,
It's
you
not
don't.
in-
You need 1,500 metres.
Not in G.
I mean,
Below,
Oh,
below
gee.
sea ground
below
level.
3,000. It's
Below sea ground.
just visibility, isn't it?
Below 3,000 foot,
Yeah.
below 140 knots.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can have 1,500 meters visibility. And you just need to be clear of cloud
That's right.
Yeah.
And inside of the ground.
and inside the ground.
Good. No, that's fine then. You're fine.
Okay,
On your way, citizen. No rest today.
right, we'll study some examples of airspace, but these are, this is what we've got in terms of A to G. This is how it's shown on the map. We'll come up, we'll look at some examples. All right, here's an example. In addition to the lines and the marking, we've also got our altitudes, at which they start. That one starts. That's 3,500 plus. It's Class A airspace. That one is multi-layered. So it starts at 3,000 foot as Class D, and then above 3,500 foot, it's Class A. Yeah. Right. This is Class G, I believe.
So we can't go in D or A.
We can,
But as long as we're below 3,000 foot.
below 3,000 foot. Yeah.
And technically D or E, but we would need a VFR, a VHF radio.
No, we can go in
And a
E.
license.
And in E, we don't have to be in touch with air traffic control, so long as we're flying VFR, I believe.
For D,
Sorry, D. No, I'm sorry, no, not D. I thought you said E. Sorry,
Talking about D, about E.
sorry. Right, yes, D. You would need to be in touch with ATC. Right. Sorry, this is reiterating something we've already looked at. Control zone from ground level to 2,000 foot above aerodrome level. Right. So that's one example of a control zone. Two examples of control zones. You can see here we've got the ATZ in the middle, and we've got the control zone around it. If we go on, we want the more interesting example is going to be the control area above the control zone. Right, and remember what I told you about multi-tiered? Yeah, that tiering. So I believe that will be shown, that will be here. And so these will be stepping upwards away from the ATZ.
And all the big airports have that around us, so that stepping you'll encounter on a flight from Stags to Newcastle,
Yes.
or to Middlesbrough. It's a smaller one at Middlesbrough, but it's actually quite big for Newcastle, and you will get it. Start having to think about it over the other side of the A69,
Yes.
or is it the 66?
Yeah, 66. You mean heading for Durham way? Yeah,
It's the A66, isn't it?
it's the A66. Yeah, near Barnard Castle. Well, it's just after there that you need to start thinking about it. Let me see what we got, right? So this is another showing the airways, I think, coming out of the control area. And that's an example of one there. That's in the chat.
Sorry?
Is it?
Mike was just saying there used to be a nice KML. If anybody uses Google Earth, there are KML files for UK airspace.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of good websites as well that have it.
I think so. If you've got the Skytrax device, then you can actually, well, even if you don't have the Skytrax device, you can actually download the Skytrax airspace onto as a KML, as a Google Earth set of files, and then you can compare your last flight to those, and just to make sure that, because I think they also represent minimum. So they don't show maxes, but they show ATZs. So they're quite useful for showing them the minimum. So where you could potentially have transgressed. Okay, so that's an airway, and that kind of ties it together as well. That's what it could look like. Right, that's another diagram. Must be sick of these diagrams by now. Right, okay, so there's plenty of stuff. I mean, I'm going to make this accessible. I think the idea is really to use this, the Skyway code, and any other information source you can find, and you should be able to study this, and you'll have more or less enough to pass the exam. Winch launch activities, so you'll need this. So Bradwell, Longmynd, you're operating near glider stations. And so here in the first one, gliding is the primary activity. And this shows the, this 2.5 here is 2,500 foot above mean sea level. What you can also get is, I think in Bradwell, you get the actual height of the glider station as well. And then followed by, I think it's 3-4. To show the height of the actual the winch that the actual winch can get to. I think there's no legal requirement not to enter this area, but you will sometimes find that you want to stay clear of it. Yeah. Here in the second one, it's gliding occurs here, but it's not the primary activity. And this one, I think, without cables, so this would imply aerotow, probably. Guessing a little bit there. Right. You might see that on some maps. Paragliding has been removed from lots. This symbol has been removed from lots of places on most maps. I think Pete's got an example on one of his. One of the old maps. Maximum altitude cables represented in thousands of feet of ground ground level plus site elevation. So what you're looking at, that second, that 1 point something, 2 point something is thousands of feet above sea level. and avoid flying over these sites below the indicated altitude for safety. Yeah. Right. Other symbols. So the main one I want to point out here is freefall parachuting, and we've got another slide on that. I really need to order these slides. If you see this, this can appear at an aerodrome, or it can appear on an air map, and that also shows gliding takes place at this aerodrome. And it's like just a double cross. Right. Free fall parachute drop zones. Right. I think there's no requirement not to go into these areas, but it doesn't make sense to do it. And also, it's another reason you want to check your NOTAMs, because your a NOTAM could be set up to indicate that the activity will be taking place at a particular time. Also, you might actually see this symbol used in conjunction with a danger zone, or prohibited zone, or a restricted zone, or areas. But really you should avoid these places, especially if you're flying in great weather, then the chances are someone else will want to be up there as well. So it doesn't make sense to go near these areas. Bird sanctuaries. Right. High intensity radio transmission areas. Look at this. You've got the horizontal and vertical hatching there. There's no requirement not to go into these areas. You can actually transit them. You really wouldn't want to, though, unless you're not bothered about your fertility or whatever, because obviously, a prime example of this is Fylingdales. So you've got the radar station there, and that's emitting, high intensity radar. So you want to avoid it. But if you're going to nibble the edges, so to speak, if you're going to transit the edge, then you can do that if you need to. Yeah, but you just don't want to head for the middle.
If it's any help on Fylingdales, it's only for about a 10,000th of a second every few seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
If
but it is at several megawatts.
you can actually fly, it's Hull of Holcombe. There's a site there, and that's actually a lot closer. That's well within the Herta there. But I think so. I don't think it's flown very much.
It's below the beam line.
Is it?
Whole of Holcombe is, yeah. So the beam line goes up at an angle of about 7 degrees.
Yeah.
So the whole of Holcombe, as the phased array swashes through the dish, is actually below the level of the sort of the scanning beam as it goes out. Scanning, transmitting beam as it goes out.
Okay. Right. I'm not sure why this note. I think I've cut and pasted this from something. So unmanned aerial systems. That's what UAS stands for. Really, everyone needs to be aware of stuff like this. It can make your GPS go funny, give you an incorrect position. So that's another reason not to go into it.
Actually, older varios don't like radio transmission next to them.
Right.
I mean, if you're older vario and your mobile phone are right next to each other on your instrument panel, then that can cause difficulty.
Actually, I've got a Digifly Vario, and on my flight deck, and I had a breast pocket mounted radio, and if they became too close, then obviously that would interfere. The Vario would interfere with the radio. You'd hear it. Right, so these are just some airspace symbols. We've got some examples here. We've got some aerials, high obstacles. I don't know why it's lighted or unlighted. I'd have said lit or unlit, but yeah. So I've got examples of cables there, single obstacles, multiple obstacles. I'm not sure about these 3 diagrams. I'm not sure about them. They don't look very airspace map-ish.
There's always a question on these, you know, just trying to get you to get the wording right, particularly on obstacles or high obstacles. So another guaranteed question here, but so sometimes they can be quite tricky on the multiple choice. So take it slow and think about it.
That'd be that's multiple antennas or obstacles, singular antenna, and that would be the cable, I guess.
Yeah, basically the top one is only more television masts.
There's 2 now.
It's 2 now.
Yeah, aren't there? Yeah, that's strange, isn't it?
So these would be temporary airspace. I'm not sure why I've got this slide here. I don't think it's a very useful slide. But these would be notified by NOTAM, wouldn't they? If they were put out. So restricted area, yeah. So yes, you could have a temporary restricted area put out probably via NOTAM. Did we cover Purple Airways at all?
Not yet, no.
I thought I saw a slide that say Purple Airways doesn't exist anymore, it's done by NOTAM.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's something. So Purple Airways would refer to a royal flight, and they don't exist anymore. It's done by NOTAM.
They don't do that because they've gone green.
Green Airways.
They're always saying that they're green, so they don't do any royal flights or helicopters at all. That's what I think.
Okay.
They just don't tell you. That's what they do.
Just saying.
Right. Restricted areas, danger areas, prohibited areas. Right. How do these work? That's kind of the diagram. You're going to see some slightly different presentations on some of these slides, mainly because they're older slides. But what you're looking for is this kind of diagonal mesh, which indicates it. Prohibited areas, for certain, you can't go into. Now, danger areas and restricted areas, you need to find out whether or not you can go in. And in the case of danger areas, you almost certainly need to check that you can go in at a particular time. And so your first assumption on seeing a prohibited, restricted, or danger area is avoid. Yeah. So we'll see some examples later, but of how that can affect us and what we can do about it. Right. So again, this diagram is actually misleading. Now, if you're going to search for this, so that P there indicates that this is a prohibited area, and you're more likely to see that. So if you actually Google this, you can actually, I would look for EG space P106, and it will bring you to a particular website where you have a list of all the prohibited, danger, and restricted areas.
If you Google it, P106 is a mining converted GPU from Ethereum and Bitcoin mining.
Okay, try R, EG space R423 then. I think that's one that's over Durham. Right, so yeah, so this isn't shown with the diagonal lines on it, but it would have that on a real diagram. It's just that it's an older slide. That's two more examples. So they're both restricted areas. It's the R155 and the R154. Is what you're really looking for, and that's what will actually be shown on the air map. I think that EG is only going to be on a list-based reference. We'll look at some examples later. Right, some examples later. Right, so what have we got here? This is walk-up range, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so it's D407. So if you look up walk-up range, then you can actually find contact numbers. You can actually give them a ring, and you might take a little bit of hunting around to actually find it. And you can actually say, can I transit tomorrow? You can actually ask them and they'll give permission or not. You might have to hunt around a bit. Now, the danger areas do actually have open access days, because obviously they're ground level activities. The open access days don't imply any kind of ability to overfly. Yeah, don't assume that. You need to get direct permission to transit from them. Yeah.
And particularly for walk-up, for you guys and girls on the call, Ed Cleesby often does call walk-up and get permission from him.
Okay, and we'll look at some maps later, and we'll see why that makes a difference for us. Right, so got another. Right, it's got another one here. We've got D442, and that goes up to 3,000 foot, and that one goes up to 10,000 foot. Yeah, I'm not actually sure what that reference is there underneath. Occasional. I think that might mean occasional, but again, you need to verify. But the key there is the actual reference, which will help me track down what the actual danger zone is. Right. Okay, I'm going to move on from that. This is useful areas of intense aerial activity. So we'll do the acronyms towards the end. So AIAA, and that is this line around here. And I'll show you the more up-to-date version of that line. Yeah, which is that the diamonds, yeah. Okay, so we've got another diagram with oh, by the way, this look at, if you look at this has got the parachuting, but within a danger area, maybe. Yes, it's D129. So yeah, so that would indicate that you can't transit that at all. Right, you might see some fast jets doing their combat practice over the wash, and that's where you might see it. Right. So I think the only one we've not covered there at all is gas venting. So obviously you don't want to overfly that. Move on from that. Okay. Right, so what have we got? This is the Dales. So this is one of Pete's maps. So these paragliding symbols are useful for us today, but they no longer appear on the maps. But weather fell there. So how might we actually use that? So say we launch from Summerwater here, and we're heading towards Carlisle. We might want to stay over the high ground, and then we're going to come at some point to walk up range. And that's why you might want to have been in touch with them the day before to see if we can transit.
Gov.uk is the website that all this information is on. So we've got that specific open date, but they publish like a year in advance. And they also have the number of the range sort of gunner, range foreman, whatever his name is.
Another popular route is from Stags, heading this direction towards Durham, and you might want to. This is Bellaby, I think. You might want to.
Yeah, I mean, Bellaby and Feldham, particularly from Windbank, Hawkswick, tend to figure quite big, just because of the wind direction lining up.
Okay. Right. So if you're on a long flight from Dodd Fell, you might be coming over this way, and that does happen. Dodd is a fantastic cross-country starting point, and you're going to be coming across this way. And I don't think we've got Grimwith Reservoir somewhere to the north there. And then, of course, you're going to be wanting to get around this corner here, and just keep the mouse on the screen. You want to get around that corner there, and then because the convergence usually comes around this area, you get this north-south convergence. You get the track often changes, so then you're actually heading on a much more southerly course.
And,
that can happen.
And it's the area of intense area of activity towards your.
Yeah, there are a number of airfields around York, but to be honest, it's a large area. That area of intense, that AIAA is probably beneficial for us because Leeds Bradford did want to expand their airspace, and that would have expanded it north, which would have cut off this route pretty much altogether. So the fact that there are other users like military, that it's actually kind of aided us kind of stating our case, that we want to be able to transit in that direction.
Are there any things that aren't displayed on maps that those paragliders need to watch out for that might be dangerous, things to avoid, like safari parks, for instance? Or
That's a good one.
Stuff that isn't, you don't expect somebody to be landing, but if you're landing with lions and safari parks,
little lions. The wild boars.
Stuff
down from Pilot. So on a flight from Pilot, there's a farm that does have free roam of wild boars.
Yes.
And apparently that's
the stuff that you wouldn't immediately think of. Paragliders might have found themselves in a situation over the years. Yeah.
Well, to be honest,
to avoid that.
take it on a pinch of caution. Landing in any field with cows, because you can't sex the cow from any height. Now, if they've got calves, your mum's going to feel quite protective, but also if they're bulls, certainly it's interesting, but if they're bullocks, they're very, very curious.
Yes.
I've been chased out of a field before now.
Yes. I think it's cows and whatever you think of the bulls.
Joe Edmonds, he was rammed by a teaser tub.
Yes.
a year and a few months ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Right. Okay. Right.
We digress.
Okay. Right. That is Carlton Bank. So Northern England, also a great XE launching site. So as Mr. Logan will testify, Mr. all the way to Lincoln.
Oh, I'm a bit further.
Yeah. So yeah, it's this is a great site. You know, you'd be doing all right if you get to Pickering. That's maybe what 30 odd K. And you know that's quite feasible. Scarborough is possible. I think Dave May did 78K this year to Bridlington. So yeah, this is your Fylingdales. That's the Herta, and yeah. So I've kind of been close to that before, and yeah, I think I wasn't aware at the time, but you can actually kind of nibble the edges. You know, if you're not worried about the radiation, you know, you can actually go into it. Yeah, that's.
The restriction on the these AIAAs, you can go in them, just be aware.
Just be aware, yeah.
Mm.
You can fly. Richard Meek. So that's Model Ridge there. Richard Meek did 200 odd K going on a south-southwest track. So we would have gone this way, and we've got the Matzes there. So did he go between those two? Do you know?
I'm not sure of the height of the group when they went over all that, but it's worth bearing in mind, because if you're coming down off of the North Yorks Moors on a southerly track, then you're going to be fighting the tendency of the ground, which is descending, to suppress all the thermal activity. So you may be approaching those Matzes, and even those ATZs actually quite low, and therefore be, you know, fairly out of options. So you do need to be aware of them. Yeah.
Okay, that's another one.
Same one again. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got Sutton Bank there. That's another glider station. There is a paragliding site there. I think that were very unpopular with the gliding station. All right, yeah. If you are going cross country, then from Carlton Bank, then one of the first things you might find is this huge antenna.
No longer. Didn't it burn down?
It's been blown up now, but there's a temporary one in its place. Yeah.
I don't believe there's any. There was airspace around that at one point, but I don't think there is anymore.
No.
So does the congested area rule apply? I don't think it does.
Not to a lone transmitter, I don't think. It's it's an obstacle to be avoided. It's got its own. It had its own warning light.
Well, yeah. It's definitely to be avoided, and don't prang yourself on it. But I don't.
So you'd stay a few hundred meters clear, wouldn't you? I suppose. So
Ideally, yeah.
Legally, what,
I'm not
500 was it?
sure there's a minimum separation. I don't know.
So,
It's not a congested area, so that rule wouldn't apply.
right.
So yeah. But yeah, don't prang yourself on it. Right. Don't think there's anything new there. That actually does show.
That's your stepped airspace to Newcastle, though.
Yeah. So if you're coming off Stagsfell and you're going that direction, then it's going down. Flight level 105, flight level 75. Nothing to worry about until you get a little bit further north. And then it drops down to 4.5 and then 3,000 foot. When I say a 4.5, it's 4,500 foot AMSL, and then 3,000 foot. So these are flight levels, but you can see that as we drop below flight level 5.5, it starts to go into AMSL. Right. That's showing some of the stepping again, control area, and then you've got CTR in the middle. Yeah, and this is, so this is, what have we got here? Bradwell. So we've got Bradwell here, we've got the glider station. You can see that 3.4. So you have to, so when you're going above that, you need to be, avoid it. So well, you can see the altitude. I think we have a question on that later. And then you're going to be taking, if you get away.
3.4 is what, 3,400?
And you're going to be on an easterly track, and you're going to be going that way. That's a VOR, I believe, which we'll probably have a slide on. But that, so yeah, we need to avoid that, but we can go through that. Right. So you find Bradwell on a classic day. You decide to fly south in front of the gliding club, where you catch a great thermal. Quickly at 3,000 foot, and you're drifting over the back. Anything wrong with that?
That's not the point, is it?
It's not, you don't need to know where it is.
Yeah, you fly at 3,000 feet drifting over that. What's the height of the gliding club that you're in?
Well,
3.4. Oh, it's 3.4, isn't it?
The actual height of the gliding club is, I think, 1,350 foot above sea level.
Right.
But the actual possible height of the tow line is 3,400. So you would be under that maximum height. That because it's a maximum, remember, but you want to stay safe.
Yeah. Well, so then that is a problem, isn't it? You're not high enough.
Yeah. No, actually, if you're flying Bradwell, you don't really want to go, you don't want to cross the ravine and go fly in front of the gliding club, do you? They don't like that. So you need to stay on pretty much on the in front of the takeoff area. You shouldn't actually go to the south. Yeah.
But you don't need to. I mean, if it's a working day, it's perfectly adequate on takeoff.
On a windy day, you attach a tow bridle to your harness. The other end of the tow line is attached to your parked car's tow bracket. Plan is to kite up and then release. What are you doing wrong?
Well,
It's illegal. It's illegal.
Yeah, kiting. Yeah.
Kiting's
Kiting.
cars aren't moving.
Yeah. Theoretically, I think you can. If your mate was driving the car, you could maybe tow it.
But you wouldn't want to be doing.
You don't really want to do that. You can watch some videos of people doing that, and it's crazy. You want to find a proper tow operation and get your tow endorsement. I mean, doing when you're under tow, it's actually quite intimidating. You know, you can hear the line creaking, and your glider's canted back. So, anyway, I digress. After taking off from Weatherfell, you realise that you have your mate's radio. You call to him, and as you overfly, you drop it to him. Problem solved?
Not to be thrown out.
Yeah, should be dropping stuff.
Unless it's on fire.
Yeah,
And-
you've got to powder it. Yeah. Send it down.
Yeah,
You set it on fire and then
You got to turn it to sand. Yeah, that's right. Right. Let's quickly.
traffic zone.
Yeah, a traffic zone.
Traffic zone.
Top one, yes.
Actually, is it not aerodrome traffic zone?
Aerodrome traffic.
It's aerodrome traffic zone.
So the top one, yes, prohibited. Second one, no, prohibited.
Prohibited to enter. The first one is one zero is the element. So first one is you can't enter it.
You can enter it.
Danger area.
Yeah, you can't. So prohibited to, so it's prohibited.
So danger area, you need to check.
Yeah.
Prohibited area,
Can't.
can't go into.
Yeah.
Restricted area,
So,
need to check. Yeah, because I think there's a restricted area of Durham only applies to helicopters. Yeah. Can you go in that?
no.
But it's allowed.
You can.
It's allowed, but you're
You can.
advisable not to.
You just don't want to go very far into it because you'll be
For your own safety.
for your own safety. Yeah.
Air intensity you can go into.
You keep a good lookout.
Yep.
Parachute drop zones, you find out when they are. But in
Well,
theory you can.
theoretically, you can transit, but you shouldn't. Local airfield without an ATZ,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe you can. NOTAM area. I mean, that's a bad question, maybe.
Depends on the note.
Depends on the NOTAM. NOTAM is typically a notice to airman, so that can be avoidance or what's the other one? Notification on, I think.
Right, okay.
Typically, what's the one that you do on your
Campaign.
campaign? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that yours is notification only, isn't it?
Notification.
Yeah. Okay. Airspace classes, which can you go into?
F&G.
Yeah.
But
F&G.
you can go into E.
You can go into E as well.
Into E as well, yeah.
Yeah, in
Yeah,
VFR, which we only fly in anyway.
Yes.
Glider launching sites,
No.
you can theoretically overfly, but don't.
Yes.
Yeah. Right, acronyms. AGL,
Above ground level.
AAL,
Also above level.
above aerodrome level.
Right.
Okay, AMSL,
Above mean sea level.
AIAA,
Air activity.
ATC,
Air traffic control.
ATZ,
Air traffic.
Aerodrome.
Aerodrome
Aerodrome
traffic.
traffic zone.
Yeah.
CTA,
Control area.
CTR,
Control zone.
yeah, which is higher,
The zone is below.
yeah. FIR,
Flight information region.
FL,
Flight
level.
level.
HERTA,
High intensity radio transmission area.
IFR,
Instrument flight.
Flight rules.
IMC,
Instrument meteorological controls.
Controls.
Conditions.
Conditions.
instrument
Instruments,
meteorological conditions. Yeah.
conditions.
I just wanted to make you say that.
Yeah.
Matt's
Military aerodrome traffic zone.
NOTAM,
Not to airmen.
QNE,
Query nautical elevation.
QFE,
Query
Field
field
elevation.
elevation.
Query.
Query nautical height.
Nil.
No.
Nil height.
I think, to be honest, QNH, I looked this up and it's actually a false acronym. It's like an acronym that's been retrofitted.
All right.
But it's something like that.
Well,
Query.
nautical is sea, isn't it? So it's query sea level.
So TMA,
Terminal control area.
terminal maneuvering area. It's a type of CTA. UIR,
Upper flight information region.
good. Yeah. That.
Good, yeah.
VFR,
Visual flight. region.
visual flight rules,
Rules, that's right.
which you fly in.
Visual meteorological conditions.
Yes. And there we go. Yeah, nice one. Right. Okay. I think we're nearly done. Sources of information. So, yeah. You can peruse that later. Yep. There's the Logan ME URL as well. This is the Skyway code. You're going to want that. Easy access rules for SIRA. They're not that interesting, really. Okay, so exam technique. I think this is one of Dave's slides. Yeah, read the questions. Do the easy ones first. Make sure you know which ones you skipped. Check what you're actually ticking. Sometimes the later questions will actually give you clues to answer the earlier questions. It's multiple choice at the end of the day, so sometimes it can give things away. Eliminate answers that are clearly wrong and and just look at the wording as well. So take your time and, you know, yeah, and you do, I think pass mark is what, 70, is it 70%? Right. Is that it?
You all know that there's a dummy exam on the BHPA site.
I did know that, yeah, that's a good point, yeah, worth doing,
It's
isn't
up to you whether you want to take it.
I'll do a few actually.
Yeah.
Yes, good idea to do a few.
There's only
Yeah.
one there, and I
Yeah.
think it repeats, but if
Yeah,
you do something clever like delete the cookie,
yes,
it probably allows you to do it again.
yes.
Are there any questions from people online, or are we
Any
good?
questions online? Oh, wait a minute, here we go. Darren asks, is the pilot's exam like the CP where you don't have to strictly pass, or there's a full pass required?
I think
We
yeah,
send the papers away, so the BHPA mark them, a full pass is required, yeah.
yeah, that's my understanding.
it? It was a full pass, but you just said 70%.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
they don't 100%. But,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
but
you need
they
to
get
pass
the-
the grade.
Yeah, they get externally validated, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the CP exam is not very difficult. I think this is a bit more difficult. So, you know, you do need to buff up a bit. I think there's a lot of information there, probably too much. If you go through the Skyway code, then not all of the Skyway code is relevant to you, but you will find you will be able to cross-check, and you'll have, you know, an alternative way of looking at the same information. And obviously, both of those are up to date. A lot of the stuff you'll find online is has been produced. If it's older, then it may not be relevant.
Got that as a PDF. You can download it.
So yes, you can download the Skyway code as a PDF, so you can be looking at it tonight.
Otherwise, it's £13.
Jesus. How are you meant to afford that stuff?
No, it's free.
It's,
They were just giving them out.
you want to get version 3 of the Skyway code. So yeah, that's the most up-to-date one, and I think we'll be releasing the pilot exam revision, the PDF, the PowerPoint. So it's got, well, reasonable information.